Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our Supreme Solutions Engineer, along with Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department. Today, Dion's got a fascinating, I think you're going to really like this presentation on the control bars and doing automatic updates. But he's also here to answer your questions, as we all are, so you can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
There we go. And I'm going to click the show my screen.
There we go. All right,
there
awesome.
We go. Well, thank you, everybody. Good to be back. Thank you so much to Sarah, who took care of everything for me while away and really enjoyed her presentation. I watched it in the post, but want to say thank you so much for her helping us out and doing that. Again, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, especially summertime. And if you don't mind, make sure to go to the questions area and put in your Q&A questions. We will be monitoring those and trying to answer as many of those as possible. Along with that, also, we are going to, we have our email guides@alphasoftware.com. We monitor that very closely. And in fact, today's question came off of that a while back, and I finally dug myself out and got it handled. So we're going to go through a little demonstration of how to use a really powerful technique in the control bar to make your life easier and actually improve the control bar's capabilities. And as you know, that control bar has just got so much things it can do. You really want to leverage it as much as possible in your solutions because it'll make your life easier, it'll make your apps look nicer, and it'll be a lot of fun there. But again, if you have any questions during my presentation, go to the Q&A section and put your information in there. And also we'll be monitoring that. Now, we had a really fun time with the pusher stuff. Anybody who hasn't gotten that, please send us an email. We'll send out the files that are associated with that. Just to let you know, we're going to try and move towards putting things on to Git repositories so it's easier for you to get access to things. We're working on all the details on that so that as you see demonstrations and stuff, we'll have a place to go for you to go get that information without having to email and wait and everything else. We're just going to tighten up our processes and procedures to make it a little quicker to get things out to people who are interested in it. But also, you know, these kind of techniques, capabilities, and all the new incredible things that are coming down the road. And there's some very, very exciting new announcements that will be coming out very soon that I think is really going to have an enormous impact on our developers, on our community, on everybody who's involved with Alpha Software. So, you know, stay tuned here, but also make sure that you have gone and registered for the DevCon 2020. It's at alphasoftware.com/DevCon 2020. It will be a virtual event. The cool thing is you just don't get bored by myself. We will have our developer team available for both doing presentations of updated roadmaps, but also more importantly, answering questions and going through detailed demonstrations on new features, new capabilities, things that are a lot deeper than we do on a weekly basis. So if you haven't signed up, it's a great virtual, it's coming really soon. Let's see, July, August, September, you know, we're talking a little over 3.5 months or so. So it's coming along very quickly, and we're very busy putting together all that content to make it a really amazing and powerful, and most importantly, educational in terms of you're going to walk away with a lot of really good stuff you can apply to your development process, to your business, and also have the ability to connect with other developers and extend your sort of network of people you can work with to build out the solutions with Alpha Anywhere. So go there again, alphasoftware.com, DevCon 2020, and make sure you get signed up, and you're not going to regret it. So with that, you know, one other thing I always like to mention, and we kind of touch base on it, is that each Tuesday we have Transform Tuesday presented by our one and only Dave McCormick. And that is so cool. They're just, again, Transform continues to mature very quickly. The integration between Alpha anywhere, and Transform continues to blossom and get better and better. You're able to do things extremely quickly in Transform, and a lot of really good subjects are covered there. So if you're not already attending, make sure to send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, ask to be added to that list, and we'll make sure you get put on there.
Thanks.
Dave,
And
any new
it was
kind
a
of
fun,
updates? I
yeah,
wasn't
we
able
had
to
a fun
attend this week.
We had a
Sorry.
fun one. I know you were conspicuously absent. I was going through the list. I was very sad you weren't there, but
I
I know
know.
you can always catch it in recordings.
I was kind of burying
Yesterday
myself.
we did a cool one. We actually hooked up a transform form to a Philips light bulb, right? So yeah, I'm not kidding. So based on data values that were submitted in the transform form, it would actually turn on the light different colors. So it was sort of a very simple Internet of Things project, but it was a good way to show how you could do types of communication, like maybe out on a factory floor or someplace where you're not always going to have electronics, where you can actually control real world things. So that was yesterday's example. And then next week, we're going to dive back into doing some invoicing and reporting.
Very cool. Yeah, the
Yeah.
reporting aspect is so critical. And what's
Yeah.
really neat about that demonstration is that, again, they were setting the light bulb, but the reality is it's about collecting data also. So, Transform's really fundamental aspect is to make it easy for developers to deploy offline data collection systems with very sophisticated but easy to use forms for people. And they don't have to be developers. They can actually be day-to-day. So it really expands the footprint of who can do this work. And one of the key things that I'm seeing, and actually Dave has demonstrated, is IoT, the fact that everything's getting connected. So a great example I've seen is, for instance, if you're in engineering or technician doing testing and stuff like that, almost all modern testing equipment now has some level of Bluetooth capability or IoT connection kind of scenario. And so the idea is I'm filling out this form. Instead of me taking a picture of the device or typing in the information, we're rapidly moving to where it can actually talk and bring that data in. And I don't know if you guys watched, this is a pretty interesting week. We have WWDC, which is Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, which is also virtual. They're virtual after we were virtual, so I'm just going to throw that out
We
there.
announced it first,
Yeah.
exactly. Really.
They do have a few bucks to throw at it, so it's been pretty slick.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that we skated to where the puck was going to be in this case.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought one of the most interesting announcements, and again, I only go for a minute here, I don't want to bore people to death, but they built into the Apple phones since last year what's called the U1 chip, and it uses a technology called UWB, which is ultra wide bandwidth. I think that's the name of it. Basically, it's a sort of like Bluetooth, but it's a super high frequency. It's not as distance. But what you can do is it allows you to do distance location. So if you had two iPhones, it can literally tell how far those iPhones apart and also what direction from each of the phones are at. So the idea behind it is down the road, they'll have tile light trackers where you'll be able to find things, but also interactions. But what's intriguing about that is that along with the new LiDAR stuff, more and more of these phones are becoming measurement systems, that they're actually having a level of sensors on them that right now, you can collect GPS, but now you can collect information about a room, you can collect information about other devices, other things like that. So you could go and it's down to a very, very small amount. So what's cool about Transform is the fact that now you can tap into all those capabilities so that people who are actually collecting data can now use these third-party systems and third-party technologies along with Transform to automate that collection of data. It's really exciting. And we do a lot of work with companies that do field service, field inspection, manufacturing, and they're all moving very rapidly where data is generated by measurement devices, but then they need to quickly move that to forms, to other things, and was great. So great presentation that will be posted. So if you want to rewatch it, it's definitely worthwhile. And again, if you're interested, please join us for Transforms Tuesdays. I think you'll really, really enjoy it from there. Thank you, Dave. Cool.
Thanks,
So
Dion.
we're going to talk UI. We talked a lot about pusher notifications, what you can do in terms of enabling communication with there. But today we're going to dive back into the control bar, one of my favorite, very powerful I like to call it meta controls. That's not the technical name, but or we should call it mega controls or giga controls or something like that. But it's that area up top or bottom that allows you to develop really nice interfaces that have icons, image, data entry, and a whole other host of capabilities. And it's really nice because it keeps your design pretty simple. There's a lot of complexity when you put together these interfaces. different variants, different like layouts and stuff like that. And instead of having like hundreds of controls on your UX component, you have one, and then you go inside of it to manage it from there. But more importantly, which is very, very cool, is that there's a whole API around the control bar, excuse me, that allow you to interact with it from a programmatic standpoint, and for the control bar to interact with the rest of your interface. So what's neat about that is you can automate certain things. So a lot of times, you're sitting there and writing little scripts to update the control bar or modify it, and we use Action JavaScript to do that, etc. But what's really, really neat about it is that you can automate it so you don't have to write as many scripts. You write one thing and then the system will take care of it from there. So for instance, if you're moving from page to page, or excuse me, panel to panel, you may want to be updating information there. That gets kind of old. You have to remember, oh, if I move this panel, I have to also trigger an update. But there's another way you can kind of flip that around on its head. So today we're going to talk about the control bar watch event. This is a way to simplify your life, let Alpha do the heavy lifting, which is what Alpha is all about. And it's also super simple. We will do a single line of JavaScript code. So just want to give everybody a heads up. This would be considered low code, not no code, but it's fairly straightforward. And it's something you've probably done and used before from there. So we're actually going to do two quick demonstrations. The first demonstration, I'm going to set up a simple control bar with a watch event, and kind of walk you through how to set that up, introduce the concept of how it works. Then the next step is we're going to kind of show you how you could use it, say, on a mobile phone or a mobile implementation to do something a little bit more, I'd say, realistic per se from there. So we're going to do those two demonstrations. Obviously, if you have questions, go to our GoToWebinar control panel, put those in, and we will jump all over those and try and do our best to answer them, or fake our way through it. We're going to do one of those two things, either answer it or fake our way through it. So that's the way we're going to do it today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in to my development environment, and I'm going to go ahead and excuse me, create a new UX. And I'm just going to create a blank one for right now. And Dave, everything's coming through okay? Just make sure.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay. Yep, cool, dynamite. So I'm going to create a panel card because I like my panel cards. The only way to go. And I'm going to want to put in this panel card a control bar. Actually, what I'm going to do is put in the panel card a panel header, which will, much like this image right here, stick that control bar so it's always at the top, whether you're in portrait or landscape. So we'll do that real quick, and I'm going to do a panel header. And for a long time now, Alpha has introduced the capabilities because we want to encourage the use of control bars to say, hey, if I'm going to create a panel header, do you anticipate using a control bar? And there you go, heck yes, I'm going to do that. And so it creates a panel header, and again, that's denoted in this orange color here, control bar that's linked to the top of my panel card. So let's go ahead and change this. Let's see, control bar, and I'll call it 2 just because, and I'm getting smart, I'm actually doing this stuff ahead of time, and so I don't screw up as much. Okay, so now the control bar is not configured. When it's in there, it's essentially a blank thing. So let's go into the control bar. And again, if you want, this has like all the help here. So you can click on the user guide documentation. And again, Sarah has done a fantastic job of the user guide documentation and API documentation. You can also insert templates. So we already have templates that are available for common structures. So you can go ahead and put those in with menus and other things like that. But I'm going to start with a blank one here. Now, as we've talked about control bars consist of items. So think of items as the little individual pieces of elements or items that are in a control bar, and then you can tie them together with what are called layouts to make them then display properly. So I'm going to start with something very simple. I'm going to add a control bar item, and I'm going to call this HTML title. And I'm just going to say HTML. By the way, there's this HTML title. This basically clips the information. It's just a little variant on how to do it. But the name of my item is HTML title because I want it to be the title of my shown in the control bar, and I'm just using HTML. Okay. Now, when we go there, we can just go ahead and put in the title, say hello webinar. And so now we have our item. And so this is static HTML text. This means it's always going to show that. and that's what it is. Now we can put things like show expressions, so that's another alternative way of saying look at something else, and if you're in this state, show this or not, which is kind of a nice way to do things, but we're going to focus on a little bit more dynamic capability of updating this information. Now I have my item here, but I need to build my layout. Since this was a blank control bar, we need to go over to control bar layout, and we're going to add a layout, and we'll just let it be layout number 1. And you'll see we have before, middle, after, and properties. So I'm going to click add line. This then opens up my editor where I can now add items into different parts. Now, an important thing, and I've gotten this question, is why is it called before, middle, or after? Why isn't it left, right, or like left, middle, right? Well, control bars can either be horizontal or vertical. So if you're horizontal, it's left and right. If you're vertical, it's top and bottom. So this is a way to kind of make it universal, is that do you want it before whatever the layout is, or do you want it after the middle part of it? So I'm going to add this in here, and I'm going to put our title here. So now we have our title in there, and we have our first layout. As you can see down there, it gives me an example of what it looks like right here in the preview. So all it's doing is taking this item, which is a piece of static text, and then it's putting it on the layout on the left-hand side. Now I can create other items. I can create menus, buttons, the sky's the limit. You can do all those pieces there. So let's go ahead and save this and do a quick working preview. And we should see our control bar layout with our text right here. So everything's working good from there. Now, what I want to be able to do is have this text be dynamic, meaning right now I put in static HTML, but I'd like that to be dynamic. So I'm going to go back into my control bar, and we're going to introduce the concept of what's called a data element. So as I mentioned before, we're on items. Items are the different pieces. And in fact, you have things like buttons, toggle buttons, list buttons, disclosures, and the cool drop-down menu we've talked about before. What data is think of the control bar as like a meta control, and on it you can put variables, which we call data. So I'm going to call this, and I'm going to say this title text. And I'm going to go ahead in here and put in my cool webinar CB for control bar. Okay, so we have a title text called my cool webinar CB. And so I'm going to go back to my items here. Now, the cool thing about data is that this data element, currently I set it to a certain value, but I have the ability to sort of update this on the fly. So this can be dynamic versus this item with text is fixed. So what I want to do is I want to take this data element and actually show it in this item. So I'm going to click here, and I'll open up my editor here. Let me go through that a little quicker. I clicked on the ellipsis button here. And you can see here's my static text, but check out what's on the left-hand side. So I have available placeholders. These are data items, or I'm sorry, data elements that I've created, and I could have more than one. So it doesn't have to be just a single item. So I'm going to delete my static, and I'm going to put in my title text here. So now what happens is when the control bar runs, it's going to say, oh, okay, I want to display HTML title. Oh, it's using a dynamic piece of information. And so I'm going to go over, look at data and see whatever the current value is and put in that value. And so if this works correctly, if I've done my set, right? Go in here. Notice now, instead of the static text, it's putting in whatever I have in that data element. In fact, let me prove this. Go to the data here, go in and say control bar. And we go here. And you'll see it wrote it out there. Now, the cool thing I mentioned about data is that it can be updated on the fly. So I could actually go in here, let me go here to a button, and we'll just say this update text. And I'll open up that button. I'm gonna add some action JavaScript, and we have a full suite of control bar actions that are available. So for instance, you can refresh it, you can play things, you can set focus. There's a lot of cool things, but the one I like to use is called update control bar data. So I can go there, I can say, okay, when I click that button, I want to update that data up there. I'm going to go to the control bar ID. I'm going to select the control bar because we could have more than one control bar on my interface. Now, what variable do I want to update? It picked up and it says, oh yeah, on that control bar is this data, and it's called title text. And again, I could have more of them there. Now, the data values is equal to this. Now, you'll notice it's saying, oh, you know what, you need a JavaScript expression. Well, they give us little examples so you can see how you should write on it. So you can see, for instance, the different ways, and you can actually use JavaScript and things like that. So I'm just going to go in here and say data-driven text. So I'm using JavaScript to kind of show what that should be. And then I'm going to fire on change, which means then it's going to update anything else because you may have multiple things going on in there. And I could also do animated. I'm going to go ahead and do that so you'll actually see. Normally animated, basically it would just update the text, which is maybe what you want, but I'm going to animate it to make it look kind of interesting. Okay. So remember, when I load this up, the first thing it's going to do is load in whatever the default value is we had before. Now I'm going to click this update text, and you'll notice that it did two things. One, it changed that data, and then when it changed that data, the system re-rendered the control bar, and you'll notice it did a little animation there. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of cool. Maybe you want to have an animation to make, to give a little bit more notice to something that is there. Like if I just swap out this text, it may be a little too subtle, so you may want an animation to call attention to the fact that you navigated, and now that update is there from there. Now, if I'm moving around my user interface, I could, create these little action. I can actually go in here. I could take this and turn this into a JavaScript action and use it elsewhere. And I can actually see the JavaScript and use this JavaScript right here anywhere I want. But now I'm going to be the one who has to put the JavaScript in where I want to update that control bar. And that can get bothersome. It's a little more work. What I'd rather do is I'd like the control bar to watch something. And if something changes, I want it to update itself. And that's built into the solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a text box, and I'll call it title text. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to call it title text. And so that is just going to be a little piece of text or a text box that I can edit from there. So now when I do the working preview, just to show you what this looks like, I can go in here and I can type some text. And what I want it to do is I want the control bar to update to whatever text I have in there. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back into the control bar. I'm going to come here to the data. I'm going to go ahead and double click and open that. And you'll notice there's a cool setting. So right here, it has the name of this data, but on the right, it says, hey, update value automatically based on a watch event. So let me go ahead and click that. And when I click that, you'll notice my interface changed. Before, I could just set some stuff. I could even set a JavaScript, etc. But here, it's asking me a few things here. So the first thing is saying, okay, what control should I watch so that when that control updates, I'll update myself. So I'm going to select that new text box that I put on the interface. Now it's asking my initial value because remember, this only triggers when it runs, meaning when someone changes that text. So I'll go in here and I'll say default state value. I'm just putting in there for there. Now this is where my one line of code happens. So what happens is the system will automatically now start watching that text box. And when it sees it change, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to run whatever JavaScript you put in here. And you can see there's some instruction here. So if I wanted it to say, if that field changed, all I want to do is say, for instance, field changed. Then what will happen is, and again, notice this return, that anytime that field changed, it's just going to send to the control bar to that data field changed. But that's kind of boring. It's fixed. What I really want to do is take the value of that control bar, that text box, and put it in there. So I'm actually going to do here, I'm going to return, and then I'm going to go ahead and start doing my dialog.object.getValue, and then right click on it, and there's only one item, so it's selected it there. So now what it's going to do is when this title text changes, it's going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to run this JavaScript. What I'm going to do is use a built-in little thing to get the current value of that title text and update there. Now, I'm pointing to the same field, but that doesn't have to be the way. You could point to anything else on your user interface, and you would see it would pick up that. And you could use any other JavaScript. So for instance, you could use a lot more sophisticated JavaScript things like do calculations and things like that. So like the number of items or records or changes from there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice now it's written my little watch event. And let's save this. And let's go into working preview. So as we mentioned before, it's going to have a default value. And notice this field change. So it's blank. And that's something we'll talk that you have to work through, is that because this text, like behind the scene when it got rendered, it did fire the change event. That's why you're not seeing something here. So let's go ahead and do it and go webinar event. Check that out. It's actually fast enough that it'll actually do it even before I'm done there. It depends on how that gets triggered here. But notice every time I change this title text, it basically runs that little piece of JavaScript and updates my control bar automatically, which is really cool. Now I can still update that control bar with other methods, but I've got both of them valued. Now the important thing, and really why I love watch events, is now I don't have to worry about it. Let's say, for instance, let's look at this. I'm going to create another button real quick, and I'll go change text. And this is a simple button here. And I'm just going to go in here and put in dialog.object.setValue. And we'll go ahead and put title text, comma, button change. Okay. So all I've done is when I click that button, all it's going to do is write the words button change into this text here. Now let's go ahead and do this. So first I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to say hello there. Okay. Now I'm going to change the text here. Watch this. Now notice what happened. It changed the text here, but it also, because that changed, it kind of did a cascade operation and updated here. So the beauty is I don't have to go into this change text here and add my code to keep the control bar up to date. I just link the control bar to what I want it to monitor. I'm done. And it saves you enormous amount of coding. I mean, and little mistakes where things don't update, etc. You put the burden on Alpha. Let it monitor and take care of stuff. You don't have to. So that's really, really a powerful way to go. And what I like to do now is I'm going to go ahead and show you a little more realistic example. Only take about 5 or 6 minutes, or well, probably 7 minutes. But if you have questions on this, please put in your there. But I want to get that done so you can kind of see a little more realistic setup there. So Dave, audio, everything coming through okay?
Sure is.
Okay.
And,
so
I'm going to actually, I know you want to go through there, but if we could just answer
no, go ahead.
quick
I'm going to
question.
go ahead and I'll just pause right here. Go ahead.
Sure. So the question is, it seems like it would be pretty straightforward if you want to use this concept to update the control bar from a pusher action, couldn't you? Because pusher would then update your field and...
Yes,
correct?
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there's two ways to handle it. You could actually put in that pusher, on pusher message. You could write the little JavaScript to take the incoming message and then do something with the control bar. But it may be easier just to update some fields on the screen and then have the control bar linked to that. Again, the fewer amount of coding you do, the better in terms of your application.
Yeah.
The old adage, this was great from Steve Jobs. He said, it was like the most expensive line of code is the one you write. So it basically said, if you let the system do the coding right from there. Okay. And I'll come back to it in a minute, but I'll tell you, they're more in the coding world and they have their own technology called Swift. It's a coding language they kind of developed and it's now open source, but they've really built their software business around that new technology. But if you go watch, and just it's kind of interesting to watch, when they're building user interfaces, they're using what is called declarative technology, which by the way is what Alpha's been using forever. So they went away from the drag and drop kind of concept stuff because that doesn't work in a dynamic world to what's called declarative, which is where in our case, and you'll see in a minute, what we do here is you'll notice, and this kind of, and I know people who are on the line have already bought into it, you don't actually see a layout, you see a structural declarative environment showing how things should be structured. And then on the fly, the declarative structure then matches to I'm on an iPad, I'm on an iPhone. And what's really interesting about that is that a lot of the demos I've watched this week, they're trying to unify where you write one piece of code and it works on an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac. And the operating system takes the declarative structure that you do and then ties it to it. So for instance, when you're on a when you're on a Mac, it'll actually add menu items because Macs have menus, whereas iPads and iPhones may not. So what's interesting is Alpha's been ahead of the curve in terms of how we approached user interface design. If you look at any modern language, such as React or Swift UI or anything like that, they've all gone in the same direction. What's very interesting is they really don't have a builder like this. It's more just writing code and then it does it. So we're even still ahead on that standpoint there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go in here. I'm going to delete this. I don't need this. So I've gone ahead and selected a default mobile interface. So let's go ahead and save this. And I'll save that as number 2. And I'm just going to go through this very quickly. So what I want to do is I want to have basically a mobile device that shows a set of customer records. So I'll go list customers. Quick setup. We'll go ahead and let Alpha do the work for me. Yep. Got to select the table first. Go to customers, field list. We'll go ahead and select a bunch of these. Okay, and then I'll set up and make a detailed view. Great. So I let Alpha do all that work. I'm going to go here to panel card 2. I just want to move my stuff out of my first one, so I just have my list in here. You see, I've done this a couple times. Okay, and then here I'm going to go ahead and fill container, go into here, and what I want to do is remember when a list is built using that, it creates a columnar or spreadsheet style, grid style interface. Problem is that doesn't work well on a mobile phone. So I'm just going to go over here to list properties. I'm going to select freeform, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use one of the predefined templates to create my freeform. So I like, again, Alpha can do all the heavy lifting for me. And I will set company name and contact name. Okay. And we'll go into this. So now we'll go in here and we'll see we've got our working preview. Now we have our little mobile app. By the way, fully disconnected, fully operational if I wanted to edit data. Right now I haven't set the click event, but you'll notice that when I click here, it goes over here and it actually updates the detail view there. Actually, why don't we just do this? I'll go in here, go to, I won't worry about that for right now. What you would do is you go to list events and you'd select on click event. And in here, you would put in action JavaScript to move you to the second panel. So you actually, when you click on the device, well, let me just do it. I'll set the action JavaScript. We'll go ahead and add a new action. We'll go nav detail. And we'll go ahead and panel action. Set active panel to be panel card 2, should rename that there. And we'll go ahead and say, okay. And then right here, we'll go insert code to run that and now the detail. So now it should do there. Now, the key thing is you remember in our control bar here, if I go in the preview real quick, you'll see that we have a piece of static text called my app here. And I want to kind of keep this up top. What I want to do is when I'm on this page, I want to have a sub control bar that allows me to then update and have some guidance like save, etc. Now, there's 2 ways to do it. I can create a 2-level single control bar and then modify it there, but that's a little bit more work. So I want to make it simple. I just want to say when I'm on panel card 2, I want to have a new control bar. So now when I'm in panel card 2, it's going to show a second control bar here, and it will still show the first control bar because remember, I have a panel navigator at the top that surrounds all my panel cards. And then on each of the panel cards, I can actually add a control bar. So you'll notice when it shows my list, it's not going to show that control bar. but when it goes there. And again, you could consolidate this and actually just update this when you're on this, but it takes a little more work, and I'd rather just keep it super simple for our demonstration today. So let's go into this control bar, and I'm going to go to my items, much we did there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call this record title. So I'm creating an HTML item, if I could spell, called HTML. And since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and add a button. It's not going to do anything, but I just want to kind of show you this. And I'm going to call this button save. And it's going to be a image only. And I'll go ahead and find my icon just to show you how I'd normally lay things out. So it gives a little more flavor. And that's the save record there. Okay, so we have two items here, record title and there. So I'm going to go in here and say, I could type in there. But the problem is, what I want to do is when I show the record, I want to actually show the name in the control bar instead of just having it in the data. So we can modify this very simply. We can go to data. I'm going to add a new item, and I'm going to call it record title text. And again, instead of me hard coding, I'm going to say update the value automatically. So what control can we watch? Well, we could watch two different controls. We could watch the list, or we could watch a actual control on the screen. So for now, I'm going to make it easy and do it on the screen. You could actually, you know what? Let's watch the list, because I just like that one better. So I'm going to select my thing, and I'm going to click list customers. So that means whenever list customers changes, i.e. someone clicks on something, I want it to update that title text. So the initial value, we'll just put in here, record title. Now, again, we're going to use the same technique here. I'm going to go in here and say dialog. Oh, remember, this is very important. You have to say the word return. Dialog dot object dot get value. Now, remember, we put in that title text. Well, what's really cool is I right click on this, go to list controls, and you'll notice it's showing list customers. I can actually go in and look at the fields that are in list customers. And by the way, they don't have to be displayed. They could be hidden fields. So I'm going to go ahead and say contact name. So you'll notice now anytime that list is modified, it's going to automatically trigger this JavaScript, which is going to go look at the list, look and find the current company name for the selected row and return that. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to items. I'm going to go to my record title. And instead of static text, I'm going to put in my little record title text. So this will always be updated by data and there. Now I can go to my layout. I apologize, I'm moving a little quick, but I want to leave time for questions. So we don't have a layout, so I'm going to create a layout here. And I'm going to have, let's put it in the middle. We're going to add the record title. And then on here, we're going to put in the save button. And you can see, so we'll have the record title in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, it will have a little save button. It does nothing, but that would be a traditional place you would put a save action. Or over here, you'd like have an add action or things you can do from there. So let's go ahead and do one other thing. This is using alpha. I'd like to use, let's use blue to save this thing. And if I haven't screwed anything up, it should work. So you'll see when we launch, it has there. Now remember, this is that first control bar, so it's static. Now when we click here, we should go into here and notice what's showing right here, the current customer name. Now this button's there, but it doesn't do anything yet. So now I'll go back. Let's go ahead and select Mr. Hardy and around the horn. And that's a very traditional kind of thing. You want to kind of put some header data showing what record you're working on so you don't clutter up the part where they're actually editing the data. So the beauty of this, and what's really nice, is that I could have achieved the same thing with the following. I could go into my list of customers, I could go to my list events, and on click, I could write some code here, blah, 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 to look at the current record that's selected and then go update the control bar and do all that stuff. But I now have to remember to do that anytime I want to have that updated. Whereas now, I don't care. I can basically, now that I've got my control bar set up and my text is automatically watching that control, anytime that control updates, I'm done. I could be somewhere else and I don't have to worry about those pieces there. So the watch capability is super duper powerful because it automates and reduces the amount of code you have to work about. And really, to get this whole thing to work, it basically took a single line of code, which was just finding the value on the screen. And that's a very common thing. If you'll notice, even help write it by allowing me to select what field to look at, etc. Now, if your control bar has multiple data items, you can have it pull back multiple data items. There's it's fully, it's realized in terms of all the things you may want to do. But this is a very simple, and that's a common use case. You want to, when you navigate, you always want to kind of give the person the context of, well, what record are you looking at? What are you doing? What are you updating? What's the status of the system, etc. And that can be done. And as someone mentioned, that could be driven by user interface actions. It could be driven by client-side events. It could be driven by callbacks, like it does a callback and then sends some information back. You may want to update your control bar to show, oh, I just brought this new data back. Maybe there's an update to that record that you weren't aware of to check it out. Sky's the limit. But the neat thing is you can set up these data items, have them watch things on the user interface, and the control bar will just keep modifying itself to present the most current, accurate, up-to-date interface to the user. So it's really fun. And again, if you're interested in these, we'll be glad to send them out. Just send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. Again, I love the control bar. It makes your apps look really nice, does all the alignment stuff, and it has all these cool built-in capabilities to really create, just exciting interfaces for your users.
Very cool. So I am not seeing a lot of questions.
Ah.
I know, isn't that shocking?
It must have been bored. So literally, it's one of two things. It was so crystal clear. I got it. I don't need questions.
It's gotta be crystal.
Or they fell asleep, and luckily we keep the audio off. Otherwise, we'd hear all the snoring going on. Very disruptive, Or
very disruptive, exactly.
The person hitting the keyboard and you hear that.
Yeah, we get a lot of messages like that in the questions box. Yeah, I think they've fallen asleep. All right, so we do have a few questions.
Sure, yeah.
So the first one is, can you use the speech to text option in your mobile apps?
Yes, you can. That's usually supported by the operating system itself. I haven't. Yes, absolutely. And really what will happen is, go ahead and go into working preview. This is not going to make much sense because I'm on here. Oops, wrong one. The answer is absolutely. And what will happen is, let's say I'm in my mobile app here, and I click here, and then I click into a field. What's going to happen is, on the real mobile app, a keyboard is going to scoot up here, and then it will have that little voice to text dictation little button here. So you're kind of using the operating system. It's really just pretending to be a keyboard and doing that from there. So the answer is absolutely. Now, if you were looking for like a button, we do have the ability to record audio, like on PhoneGap, where you can record audio and save that as a WAV file to be submitted with the data back. So that's one, and then you could do on the fly on the back end transcription. There's other things like that. But most people just use the built-in functionality of the phone.
Built in. Yeah.
Yeah. And another cool announcement, and Google's already been ahead of this. The next version of Siri, which is what's doing that voice dictation, is going to be all local. So right now it has to do a sort of a call back to their web servers to do that. So now you'll be able to have a full offline voice dictation, and that's kind of where everybody's going. These, hardware is getting so powerful. The AI engines on them are so good that they're trying to move more and more of the processing. And the neat thing is, if you see the demo, there's usually a little lag as you talk into the phone. There's no lag. It basically, as you talk, it does it. Now, another cool technology, and again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of Apple geeking out on you, is called Scribble, which is really neat, which everybody else will grab. So just to close out that question, the answer is absolutely. We'll use the iOS built in. If you do want to record the audio, we do have capability of recording a WAV file and storing it locally and then uploading that to the backend server if you actually want to capture the person's voice and then post-process it or do things from there. Like maybe it's an interview app where you're interviewing someone Well, you just don't want the dictation of it. You actually want the interview so that maybe a lawyer later on can listen to it or anything. Not that I've had a lot of people doing interviews with me with lawyers, but that's just one that pops to mind. What's cool though
It's
is,
been weeks. Yeah.
yeah, well, and where Apple goes, everybody does. But one thing that's really cool is you notice that, we've had for some time when you click into a text area, the keyboard would come up and then you had the voice dictation. Well, with the new iOS that's coming out soon, if you're using an Apple Pen, you could actually literally start writing text on any text field in a app, and it'll translate that into text, which is very cool for
Ooh,
form
that is
filling.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Scribble. It's really neat. And that's the neat thing is we're going to take advantage of all that because we build on top of the operating system there. So someone's out in the field and they're actually, writing down instead of popping up a keyboard and having to clunkily put stuff in there, what will happen is they can actually pull up with the Apple Pen and then there will be a form there, say transform, and it'll say, what's the reading for this? We're not using the automated. You just start writing it in there and it will translate it right into text. And it's super accurate and it happens on the phone itself so that you don't need a network connection. So I think it's going to be really powerful for field inspection apps because you can use a combination of drawing for drawing things along with sort of just writing text in it. So it's a very natural thing. It's like truly a clipboard replacement. So pretty cool stuff. So great question. Sorry, yeah, I'm abusing my WWDC stuff, but I like their stuff because a year or two from now, all platforms, whether they're Apple or not, will be supporting some level of capability. I know
Mhm.
Notes and Galaxy Notes have had some of those capabilities, but it's really going to drive adoption.
Very cool. Couple other things. Oh, yeah, before the webinar, I got an email. Someone was asking me about Alpha Launch.
Oh
What's the
yeah,
deal with Alpha Launch? It came out a
what's the
couple of years
dealio?
ago. What's the deal, right? So Alpha Launch, first of all, in case you don't know what Alpha Launch is, it is an application that is already available in the App Store and in the iOS, in both app stores, basically iOS and Google Play. And with it, you can actually download that application and then take that application from the store and point it to your own server and be able to run your own mobile applications. So it's like a front end for your mobile applications, but it saves you the very tedious work of trying to get them approved and put into the app stores. So that's cool. We haven't updated it in a bit, but we know we need to because of the changes that we're doing with WK WebView, which is becoming the new standard for applications. So that work on that is underway. It's been going on for the last several weeks at least, and it's coming along really quite well. When that is done, I think it might be time for us to do another webinar on Alpha Launch
Yes.
because it is such a huge shortcut when it comes to deploying your applications and letting people see them. So
Or just testing and verifying,
and
because
testing and verifying before you actually do put it in the app store if you choose to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
if you combine, what's cool, I'm super excited about the update to Alpha Launch for two reasons. One is that if you combine, one is that I use it, so I like to keep it up to date, and it's a very powerful prototyping tool before going through all the phone gap and everything else. I can just say, hey, my map works, get it to someone. They don't have to do all the installs and everything else. It just makes things very fluid in that early phases of developing an application. But also, I think more and more people are accepting the fact that, oh yeah, I'll just get an app off the app store and download my inside app to use it there. But if you combine Alpha Launch with Alpha Cloud, you essentially are getting rid of all the DevOps stuff of sort of logistics of getting it so people can use it. The
All of it.
server to
Yeah.
serve up the stuff, and then Alpha Launch calls Alpha Cloud. So more and more, it's allowing you to focus on doing what you do great, which is build functional capabilities, build apps, build process, and then we're just making it easy to turn that into an electronic form for people to consume and to interact with. So super excited about it.
Cool. The next question we have is a reporting question. I think it was last week before, I did a webinar talking about bringing in information from Transform. And our report builder, as you know, Dion, is a flat file type of builder. So when you download the data, for example, let's say you had a record and it had a first name and last name and address, and then it had 10 pictures in it, right? If you just brought that into the report writer and did nothing but slap it right into the detail section, you'd see it repeating the first name and last name and address for each one of those addresses.
Right.
So the trick is they're saying, how do I stop it from repeating? And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just quickly taking a peek at the report editor and
Yes, by all
finding out
means.
how we do grouping, which is the answer to that question.
Okay, should I just use a SQL data source or?
SQL, yeah, any data source is fine
Okay,
as long as it's
cool.
flat. It doesn't really make any difference because it's the
Yeah,
principle.
got it. So I'll go to customers.
Yeah, actually, let's do something that would have multiple things because customers will be unique
Well,
by.
you do it by city,
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, great
potentially.
idea. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and say, for instance, want company name and I want contact name here
Mhm.
and city. By the way, I used freeform. You really want to start using the table layout, just it's a little better technology.
You do.
But
It's a better technology because the output is much more reliable for HTML, Excel, and other reasons as well. So,
yeah,
so don't do
so
what Dion's doing this time.
yeah, I know. I'm just there. Just doing a
I
bunch of
like
report
layout
stuff
table
this week.
reports. I mean, I spent years the other kind, but I
Oh,
really like the layout
I
table.
know. It's
It's
just
really
so
neat.
smooth. Okay, so you can see here we
Yeah,
go. It's printing out on every single one.
yeah.
And you'll see contact name there. What you can do is the secret is in the band. So you'll notice that we have our detail area here, and then you have these things called bands. So what I'm
Mhm.
going to do is go up here and right click. Oops, that's properties. So let me go right here.
Move down.
And you'll
Yeah.
see I clicked on the bar at the very top, and here are the different things. You could have report headers, page headers, footers. And so it allows you to kind of decide where things, but most importantly, you have something called group. So I can insert a group, and it's going to ask me first, what should I break on? What is the grouping? So in my case, it's going to be city, although yours, it could be invoice number or something like that. Let's say
It
you
would
had
be,
invoice and
yeah.
invoice line items.
Mhm.
Yep.
In the specific case of transform, what you can use is the what's called the form instance ID,
Mm-hmm.
and that is unique. So you'll all the records that hang out together on that same invoice or whatever it is that you're printing out will all have that same ID, and it's one of the metadata fields.
Cool. So you'll
But we're
notice
using
now it
city.
added two bands. Yep, a header band and a footer band. So what I can do is I can say, you know what, I want to go ahead and move this city up here. And I'm just going to go quick and dirty and show you that now city Aachen. And so let's go down until we find London, something that has multiple. Oh, might
Oh,
have
we
to go
don't
to the
have it
next
ordered
page.
properly, I think. Right? Could that be correct, or am I wrong about that? Oh no, it looks like it's ordered on the group. Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, there we go. Here's an example. See, notice it says city, and then it's putting out the detail views. Lisboa, each one. So it doesn't look really good. But now I can go in there and say, you know what, I'm going to take and put a like a line here so I can make it look a little more presentable. Okay, medium line there. I actually don't need the footer, but in the footer you could put totaling and things like that. So you can say for this group of records. So the trick is that group technology to put together the groups that make it look a little nicer. So you notice now the City of London showing me these group of items together, the different people are in London. So again, the way I got there was report, and then I inserted group, and then you could have multiple levels of groups. So you're not limited just to one level. It could be as many levels as you want.
Yeah, it sure can.
I hope that was
Yes,
what you were looking for, Dave.
that's exactly it. Let me take a look and see what else we've got. Could you put the control bar vertically or at the bottom to see how you'd handle those differently? Oh, yeah, another control bar question. Excellent. I thought we'd get another one.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's take this one right here. And I think properties. Let's try edge left. I think that's what we'd set it up. Okay. So I'd have to play with it. Edge left. So it did do that there, but it didn't do the vertical. So I'd have to play with that. Oh, it's in the panel header. So it's forcing in the panel header. Let's try
Ah,
this.
okay, that makes sense.
I'm just gonna, I'll just leave that there so I can put it back in and went after it. I don't know if that will work, but well, I might have to do a little research on that. I mean, I've done so. Yeah, it's over here on the left and it includes the name in there, but I might have to do some adjustments on that. So, but it is meant to be able to be handled as the layout here, because of the way this is structured, both horizontal and vertical. So the idea is maybe you have you want kind of a left tab when you're reviewing a record, you maybe have 5 or 6 icons and it won't fit up top. You want to be able to put them on the left-hand side. So we'll look into that and find out how you would do that, because that's kind of a cool visual representation, especially if you have like a slide out scenario that goes in there. I thought it was under properties, edge. See, no, I'd have to check on that and see where that's at. Good question.
Awesome. Next we've got, I think I have a good one here. Where did it go? Oh. Here's a good one. Okay, so this person has got a view box on a panel card, and the view box does not take up the entire width. I'm guessing width here, but the question is, how do you go about centering a view box in a panel card?
Oh, okay. So one way to do that is with the alignment control. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a panel card here. And inside that, I'm going to do a quick view box. Okay. And let's just go ahead and here, we'll just make this static HTML. Normally you'd go and you change this from HTML to data, but I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go to layout and I'll say text here. Okay. View box. Mr. Literal. Okay, so it's going to render the view box inside my panel card, and it's just going to put it right here. What I can do now is I can, by the way, this is how you set the height and width. If you want to fill the container, you would do that. And then what it's going to do is it's going to consume, get rid of the title, and it'll assume here. Now, if you go this method, you actually have to go in here and use like CSS to align your content, because it's just going to take up all that space and then it's going to look at its content to say where it should be centered or located from there. Now, the other option, which may be a more approval, is I'm going to get rid of this fill container, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, my height and width, what I'm going to do is go over to container, I'm going to put it in a container, I'm going to add what's called an alignment container. And
It's
an
my favorite container.
Yeah, I use it a lot.
It makes everything work.
Yeah, and so the alignment, it basically allows you to go here, and once you've put stuff in there, over here you can see the container alignment. Oh, what I wanted is centered, and vertical alignment, I want it in the middle. But this could be any way you wanted it. Now what will happen is when it renders, everything inside that, if it worked out correctly, is in the center of my location here. And it's a little deceptive, but it is aligned. Notice there's white space around it. So you'll probably want to adjust, say, the height and width and stuff like that. Maybe, and you have different items here. So you can play with it, but that allows you to align your controls. And this is nice for buttons and images and stuff like that, that you want them nicely presented. And the cool thing about the alignment stuff, which is kind of nice, is that alignment container, much like a panel card, is that if I am in a mobile environment, let's go ahead and do that. And let's look at it in a mobile environment. If you go horizontal, it will reset that. Although, it didn't do vertical, huh? Have to check that out. That's interesting. It should have that vertical space there, but it will. Oh, you know what? I have to set the container width 100%. That's what I missed.
Yep.
This is going to, okay, so very important concept before we leave. When you put a container around something, the container will size itself to the content within it. So it's going to make that container, this container by default is 3 inches by 4 inches. Now, because I've set the width of this container to 100%, what it's going to do is it's going to then center things, hopefully, in the middle. So let's go back here. Yeah, it's not showing there. So let's go here. I'll have to go back and double check that. Strange. We'll play with it a little bit. But now notice that this is properly centered in there because the container is this here and it's 100%. So it says, oh, okay, I'm going to take this and put it in the center of the whole screen, not just that 3 inches by 4 inches because it didn't have an explicit container width. And you'll notice it also set container height to screen height so that it grabs the full height and expands this container to sort of grab the whole thing there. But I'll check the mobile thing. I'll have to play with that with Sarah and see what we can find out about why it doesn't look like it's showing up properly on the mobile.
Awesome. Thanks
Great
very
question.
much, Dion.
Yes,
well, we are out of time. Dion, thanks so much for presenting. Sarah, thanks for standing by and answering questions in the back. And thanks for everyone who showed up. Helps keep today's discussions lively. If you have further questions, of course, send them to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. We hope to see you here next week. Take care and be well. Bye-bye.